by saying this. I think we spend a good part of our lives, and I also speak for myself when I say that, to accept the things you think are not so good about yourself, but also really to accept the things that are good about yourself. I wanted to also talk about, there are these two forces in our life. One is the need to belong. I think we're all wired to want to belong. Mm-hmm. And yet we're all wired to really come to terms with who we are. And sometimes, and most often really, there's sort of like a tussle between these two forces where we find ourselves trading one off for the other. So in the quest to belong, we're sort of dissolving who we are or diluting who we are so that we're more accepted. Or, sometimes we do take a stand. We're sort of, run the risk of being disassociated with people, or being really, sort of being the minority or being excluded. So if you talk about through those milestones in your life, those landmark moments or stages of your life, what has that journey of acceptance looked for you?
So, what you said, Aisha, is true about acceptance and belonging, because they're so important to us. And I work with survivors of sexual violence, and one of the challenges we have when working with survivors as part of their healing is to, first of all, I think, diminish the power that shame has. So when we struggle with accepting who we are or not being part of a group, I think shame plays a significant role in that. So I don't think that I was necessarily free from that, but I was free from this idea of shame. And I don't know where that came from, to be honest, because it was around me, even though it was not actively taught to me, like so many women are taught that. It was around me. But I never accepted that there was anything about me that needed to be ashamed. I had to be ashamed of. And so while it isn't that I didn't feel shame about certain things, I genuinely did not have shame as something that I wore deep in my soul. Like, it did not inform everything that I did. So in that sense, my transition and my journey of transitioning from, in very crude terms, because that's what most people understand, from male to female, in the eyes of the beholder, because as far as I'm concerned, I was always a female. And even when we worked together, although you described me as effeminate, which I was to someone who didn't know me, I was already out as a trans person. I knew that I was going to transform my body so that I would be able to live life on my terms without feeling the discomfort that I felt in how I was being forced to live, but also how I felt about my own body. So even when I struggled with what was known as gender dysphoria and struggled with how my body looked, I don't think I really sort of felt ashamed of it. So in terms of milestones that helped me get to the stage of acceptance, I would say the most significant, or the first milestone, was when I was about 15, 16. And for the first time, actually, but just when I was leaving school, I experienced a sense of acceptance. I acted in a play on stage, and I was dressed as I played a character of Mrs. Alibaba. And in fact, in this podcast that I did recently, I referenced going to school after 25 years and speaking at the reunion. And a lot of the teachers from there came and reminded me that I was Mrs. Alibaba. And that experience at 15 was actually wonderful for me, because for the first time, I was able to express myself as a woman, in the sense that I was accepted as a woman, even if it was on stage. But clearly the impact of that was so significant that 25 years later, teachers still remembered that because they saw that was the only time where I was able to be myself. So that, and then when I finished my 12th standard, or was going from college to university, I was it then? No, so slightly earlier than that, I was very suicidal because I just couldn't cope with having to not be myself, for people not recognizing who I was. So the issue was not me being accepted, but them accepting me. So I accepted myself, but they were not accepting me. So that came to about belonging. Like if they can't accept me, then do I actually belong here? And that's where a lot of my suicidal ideation came from. And I didn't really want to die, and clearly because I'm alive now. And I wrote a letter to my mother, disclosing how I felt and what I wanted to happen with my life. Um, my mother, God bless her, she didn't really know what to do. And I think most parents of trans people don't know how to respond and react, because they are also struggling with this idea of shame and belonging and acceptance and what will happen either to them or their child. So my mom, was struggling with that. And I think she still struggles now and then with it. But she did help me, though. She got my grandmother and her sister to speak to me, and they took me to see all these doctors, and they all denied essentially that I was who I was. And that felt like a rejection, but actually, or it should have felt like a rejection permanently, but it didn't, because it made me even more determined that I was right. And so it was at that point that I decided that I was going to then be myself or nothing. So for whoever was interested, they knew that I was going to transition and that I was a woman, and that is how I saw my life, and that is who I saw I was, as myself. And so when you take away that the ability of the other to disempower you, then they either accept you for who you are, and then from that comes your belonging, or they reject you. But it was on my terms, and that was crucial for me. And I suppose other milestones on the journey to acceptance was, I think, going to university, and I studied hotel management. And so this is just before you met me. And it was the most, the 3 years of my life where I felt like I belonged in a space, and that I was accepted for who I was. And while I might have still been the minority, and while I was still experiencing discrimination and violence and so on, it wasn't from a group of people who became my community, so to speak. We didn't have anything in common, in the sense that we were not, like, none of them were trans. Everyone was heterosexual and cis, as far as I know. And but I fit in, and that's where I found my community. And I learned then that if the community that you're born into, or the community with which we are told we must have an identity, because of birth or faith or whatever else, or family, and you can move past that. You can find your community, as long as you don't have to give up who you are to be part of that community. But you must seek it, because it doesn't always come to you. Like, you must seek it, but more importantly, you must believe that you deserve it. And that's really how my life has progressed. And I think the other significant milestone in my journey for acceptance has been working in the feminist movement here in Scotland. So again, it's a very diverse movement, but I found my space around an ideology, a belief, the desire to do better, for women and children. But also, when you do better for women and children, you are doing better for men, because they then have to be better men to live in a society where women are equal. And that really is what has been important to me. But I am very clear that there is no way that I'm going to compromise or give up anything of who I am. And it doesn't mean that all about me is positive. Of course not. I mean, I have my insecurities, and but I am able to name my insecurities, and own them, and diminish their power over me, because if I didn't have those, then I would be the Buddha. So it's clearly I'm not.
So you spoke of, I remember you mentioning that you remember yourself standing up when you were in the nursery, which is what, 3 or 4 years old. and asking, but who am I, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Always been battling with that question. Sort of, there's so many paradoxes here. So you always knew who you were, but
Mm-hmm.
there's confusion because there weren't many like you.
Yes.
And secondly, um, while, like you mentioned, when you had that reunion in a boys' school and you went there as a woman and also shocked the hell out of everyone in a good way. And you spoke of them being bullies. So most of them did not realize, and maybe till date don't realize, how they would have played a role in making life
Mm-hmm.
so easy for you.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you have this positivity about it, sort of taking it in your stride, like almost like you're past that. And like you said, you've already said that you've taken the power away from that experience from those people, by sort of isolating it as an experience versus it being a personal definition of who you were.
Yeah.
So how were you able, so you're on one side, of course it's been terrible, I'm sure there were days, and if you were suicidal there were these really bad days where
Mhm.
there seemed no light at the end of the tunnel, but yet
Yeah.
you are here again able to sort of laugh about it and almost look at it from a distance
Mhm.
rather than relive that experience when you mention it, if that makes
Yes.
sense. So what's been grounding you?
In a physical sense, I would say being barefoot is very important to me. Um, if I can't do anything of significance if I'm not barefoot. So for me to be able to be really calm and centered about whatever I'm experiencing. So I spent a lot of my years delivering training on gender-based violence and so on, and people would know me or remember me because I never wore shoes. And I think without knowing all of this, even from my childhood, I remained connected to the earth, and that is very powerful for me, like as a way of of staying centered and focused, I suppose.
Mhm.
Um, about being distant from the experience of trauma, um, I learned that um, when I was living these traumas, and they continued till I suppose I transitioned, and when the world then clocked me as the woman that I was, and then the traumas were different in the sense that the traumas were what most cis women experience, the sexual harassment and so on, but the trauma of being a lonely trans person, not lonely necessarily, but only trans person I knew, and being a victim of the social license of violence that transphobia, that allows transphobia to sort of exist. I would say disassociation, which is a common trauma response. So I think compartmentalizing and putting the experiences in boxes. So there are all these tiny incidents, and I think if you open my brain, you'll probably find a whole I don't know, a bank vault full of tiny drawers with acts of violence stored in them.
So you did not mention a milestone of getting married and having two children now.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
but how was that? Does your spouse, for all of us, I think our spouses, the partners we choose to live our lives with, tend to play a large role in supporting us, to being that companion, that
Mm.
sounding board in life we tend to always return to. So how has that been for you?
I would say that before I met my husband, I probably had not, well, I know I hadn't known that I had experienced unconditional love. I know now that there were people in my life who did love me, but I wasn't sure if their love was unconditional. So the healing power of unconditional love is like, I don't think anything else can heal you better than unconditional love, and that's what I got when I got married. And if I was thriving before, I think receiving unconditional love has made it possible for me to achieve the the goals that most of society would say is called success. So, it is a big deal to be a trans woman in a transphobic society, to run a rape crisis center that is overwhelmingly accessed by women and girls. I get a lot of hate for it, and contempt from some sections of society in Scotland. It is a big deal in a racist society as a woman of color to have success. So all of this has been possible because of this marriage that I have, the ambitions that I have been able to develop for myself or make goals for myself is possible because of the hopes of this man for me. I probably wouldn't have seen it. I was just happy having transitioned and feeling really comfortable with myself, and looking in the mirror and really loving what I saw. And that is how I was going to probably live my life and earn enough just so that I wouldn't be out of a job. So some very fatalistic, simplistic ambitions. I just wanted to get on with what without any violence or problems. But this relationship completely transformed what was possible for me. And with my children, they too come with their traumas as children who've come out of the foster care system and who are adopted. And the effort is to give them unconditional love so that they can also thrive and maybe achieve whatever it is that they wish to achieve in their lives. So yeah, those are very heteronormative milestones. Like, society expects you to have a family and children, and I happen to have them. I probably would not have got married if I had met Arun now.
I would agree with you, and I think we put terms to the relationship. We call it marriage, we call it family, but it could look very different, and it can exist with or without that structure. Neither is correct. I mean, neither is correct or not correct. I think it's
Yes.
for you in whatever form and shape. So I know that you probably don't do this. I don't think you intentionally have affirmations, but if you had to have 3 affirmations that you say to yourself every day,
Okay.
would encourage someone who's the journey of acceptance to say, what would they be?
Be fearless. It doesn't mean that don't experience fear. It's just let it go. It doesn't do anything for us. So be fearless is one. Other things are things that I do. So do something that helps you feel grounded to your environment. So for me, it's being barefoot. Almost all the time. So that is an affirmation for me, is that this earth belongs to me too. I think that's what I would come out of that. The most important, which I should have said first, is that you be at peace with whatever is happening. So it's okay to feel angry, and it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to feel happy. Those are all transient emotions. You can feel all of those and many more in a single situation, but be at peace with it. Like that's the struggle. Like, be at peace with it.
Whatever you already know, whatever you are doing is empowering. I think each day you're walking the walk. And I was going to say, being a trans woman in Scotland, managing a rape crisis center in a saree, or you're a torchbearer for many. And I'm sure not only awareness, I think it will inspire a lot of people to embrace who they are and go beyond tolerating others and also embracing who they are. As you said, unconditional love, great power. So thank you.